Assalamualaikum students, this video is about specimen paper 2023 syllabus के लिए this as we all are aware that the A-level economics syllabus was revised, updated, and the new syllabus is in operation since March 2023 exams, and this was a specimen paper. It's question 3 of that specimen paper, and the question reads: with the help of a diagram, assess whether imperfect labor market will always lead to lower wages and higher unemployment. At least one diagram that is accurate and relevant must be drawn to be able to score beyond level 2. Of course, like other questions, we will be doing this analysis, and analysis will be of both sides of the argument. So we will say in one part of our answer, one part of our sample answer, that yes, imperfect labor markets will lead to lower wages and high unemployment, but in other section of our essay we will say that even in imperfect labor market there may be higher wages and lower unemployment. And of course we also need to tell what is a perfect labor market and what is an imperfect one. So the first line, I started this sample answer by giving the definition of labor that includes all physical and mental efforts. Labor is not just a physical labor, it is a mental work as well, but the condition is that is done for a monetary reward. And then we talk about a perfectly comparative labor market, and a perfectly labor market has few characteristics, and one of them is there's large number of buyers and sellers, and there is a homogeneous product, and in this case the product that is being exchanged is labor. Homogeneous labor means workers have similar skills, they have similar abilities, they have similar work attitudes. Now this is an unrealistic assumption. However, as we do perfect competition study in product market as well, and we assume a perfectly similar identical product, and that assumption is unrealistic as well, and this assumption is unrealistic as well. So firms also provide similar work conditions. They are also homogeneous in nature, and there is low entry and exit barriers. It's very easy to enter this labor market as a worker. It is very easy for a new firm to come and set up the business. Since businesses are of small size and workers also have very basic skills, and it's very easy and it's very quick to learn these skills, and anyone can become a worker. It's not like a neurosurgeon market where a surgeon may require maybe 10 years of training or 20 years of education. This is quite a simple task, and anyone with a training of maybe a day or two can become the labor. So in a perfectly competitive labor market, demand and supply curves determine the wages. Now over here we write quantity of labor, and along x-axis we write the wage, that is the price of labor, downward sloping demand curve for labor, and upward rising supply curve for labor, and that is equilibrium wage and equilibrium employment. So N is the number of workers that is being employed. So that is a simple demand supply diagram, but it is in the context of the labor market. That is why we should be watchful for the axis. Instead of just writing Q, we should write quantity of labor, and instead of writing price, we should write the price of labor or the wage. So an individual firm in a perfectly competitive labor market is unable to influence market demand or market supply, and that is why it has to act as a wage taker, that is, it accepts the wage that is set by the forces beyond the control of individual firm. A security guard working in a factory cannot influence the market supply. If he, for example, goes on a strike, no one will feel his absence, and someone else will replace him as a security guard. So he is not in a position to control the supply. And since his skills are so similar to the skills of other security guards, he cannot influence the demand as well. So the price is not set, and there is no role an individual can play in determination of the price, that is wage in this case. So infinite number of workers can be hired at the prevailing wage. So quantity of labor, the wage rate, and the supply for labor is a straight horizontal line. That means that an individual worker can work for as many hours as he wishes to at the prevailing wage. If a security guard I am giving the example again of a security guard, because security guard jobs does not require, the job of a security guard does not require a huge amount of skills. Anyone with some training can be a security guard. So a security guard can get infinite jobs at the prevailing wage. For example, if more than if a firm wants to hire 20 security guards instead of 10, for them my own school, my school has probably 3 gates. So if there are 3 gates and 1 security guard each, and I say, okay, for better security I need to have 2 security guards per gate, and I raise the requirement of security guards from 3 to 6, it will not have any impact on the wage rate of security guards in the market of Lahore, because my demand is so small. The demand of my security guards and the requirement of my security guards or security guards for my schools is so small relative to the size of the entire market, that my decision to have more security guards in my school or fewer security guards in my school will not have any impact on the market wage. And that means that I can hire 3, 6 or 16 security guards at the prevailing wage. That is why supply curve is straight horizontal, that is in front of you. It is also the wage rate, it is also the average input cost, it is also the marginal input cost. Now, marginal input cost is equal to average input cost, as more workers can be hired at the same wage. So if wage is 100, you hire 1 worker, your total cost of hiring workers is 100. If you hire 2 workers and wage stays the same, that is 100 per worker, the total input cost becomes 200, and marginal input cost, that is the cost of hiring the second worker, is 100, and that is exactly equal to the wage rate. So wage rate, average input cost and marginal input cost are all similar in perfect competition, as hiring more workers at the same wage is possible. Demand curve for labor downward sloping, and that is known as MRP. MRP is the demand for labor. Now that's of course a separate topic. Why is MRP is the demand curve? And equilibrium wage is already given. The wage, there is no influence of a firm on the equilibrium wage. However, they can choose the number of workers they hire. So firms hire worker as long as MRP is more than MIC. More than, if a worker contributes more to the revenues, now that is the contribution of a worker to the revenue, and less to the cost. Now marginal input cost is the cost by which the total cost rises by this amount if one more worker is hired. So as long as I hire a worker and he gives more to the revenue and less to the cost, I'll hire him. So all workers between 0 and N1 will be hired. However, workers beyond N1 will not be hired, as these workers give less in revenue but they cost more. So firm hires workers as long as marginal revenue product is more than or at least equal to the wage rate. Wage is also MIC. In this case, a perfect competition, wage rate is equal to marginal input cost. So a market becomes imperfect due to various factors. Now there are 3 factors of imperfect labor market I've quoted. One is trade union, the other is minimum wage, and the third is monopsony. Now 3 cases of market failure, imperfect market I'll be discussing. So first we talk about the trade union. What is a trade union? A trade union is a workers' association, and it aims for a fair day's wage, for a fair day's work, and in order to raise wages, they restrict the supply. Now they restrict the supply and they shift the supply of labor to the left. They may enter into an agreement with the firm that they can hire workers as long as they are approved by the trade union, and that is how a trade union can have an influence over the supply of labor. Again, x-axis quantity of labor, that is N, along y-axis wage rate, that is price of labor, demand for labor and supply for labor. Equilibrium wage before trade union was WE, equilibrium employment was NE. Now because of trade union, supply for labor shift to the left, and that causes increase in wages because of trade unions and a reduction in employment from NE to N1. So if we look at the question we are doing, the question says whether imperfect labor market will always lead to lower wages and higher unemployment. So we say yes. When a trade union comes, they restrict the supply curve shifts to S1, wages rise and unemployment rises. So yes is the answer for this question for this moment. Now, the other case of imperfect market is minimum wages. The minimum wages are effective when they are set above the equilibrium wage. So if we draw a diagram, for minimum wage, so this is again demand for labor, this is again supply for labor, along x-axis quantity of labor, along y-axis the wage rate. The equilibrium wage was WE, the equilibrium employment was NE. The minimum wage is effective only when it is set above the equilibrium wage. So for example, this is the minimum wage, WMIN, minimum wage. Now this minimum wage reduces the demand for labor to N1 and raises the supply of labor to N2, and this results in unemployment. Excess unemployment, or you may say excess supply of labor. Now this is a consequence of minimum wage. Now again we look at this. After the minimum wage is given, the wages rise and employment falls. So again the statement that will imperfect labor markets lead to lower wages and higher unemployment? So we say yes, and we have given two reasons. One, trade union, and then the case of a minimum wage. Now the third case of imperfect market is monopsony. Now what is a monopsony? Monopsony is a single buyer. When, for example, a PhD economics teacher, he wants to be a teacher, so maybe there are two opportunities of teaching in Lahore in a good university, Lahore School of Economics and Lahore University of Management Sciences. But if we take the example of Lahore University of Management Sciences, they clearly have an edge over the Lahore School of Economics as far as the research is concerned. So if a teacher wants to be a part of a good research team, wants to get his articles published, probably LUMS is the only option. So in that case, LUMS could be a monopsony. So monopsony is a single buyer and it can control either the wage or the number of workers it hires. The supply curve of labor for a monopsony is upward rising. Again, quantity of labor along x-axis, wage along y-axis, marginal the supply curve of labor. The supply curve of labor is upward rising. It is also the average input cost. It is also the wage. Now, since more workers, to hire more workers, wage has to be raised. So let me give you an example here. If I hire worker number 1, I pay a wage of 100 and the total input cost of hiring one worker is 100. If I hire 2 workers and wage is risen to 110, I will have to pay 220 as I am going to pay 110 to both workers. So my total input cost would be 110 into 2, that is 220, and marginal input cost in this case would be 220. I am hiring the second worker at a wage of 110. I am hiring the second worker at a wage of 110, but marginal input cost for the second worker is 120. Why did I pay 120 to the second worker when the wage was only 110? Because when I hired the second worker, I paid him 110. In addition to that 110, I had to pay 10 extra to worker number 1 who was earlier working at the wage of 100. I have to pay the same wage to all workers. So my cost went up by 120 when I hired the second worker. So MIC is higher than AIC, and that is why MIC is higher than AIC or wage rate, because monopsony has to pay the same higher wage to all workers. Had it been possible to pay different wages to different workers, wage may have been equal to MIC. I would have paid 110 to the second worker and continued paying 100 to worker number 1. But since I am unable to pay different wages to different workers, I have to pay the same wage to all workers. My marginal input cost for the second worker would be 120, higher than the wage. Demand curve for labor, downward sloping, MRP, and it is the demand for labor. Equilibrium is where MRP equals MIC. That is the equilibrium. Now, this will be the number of workers. This will determine the number of workers will hire, and monopsony will pay these workers the lowest possible wage given by the height of the supply curve. Be careful, you draw it clearly. It's the lowest possible wage. You will not write this wage. Now, this is not the wage the monopsony is paying. Monopsony is paying wage that is given by the height of supply curve, that is lowest possible wage, and the employment of N1. So N1 and W1 will be the wage and employment in a monopsony. If we look at perfect competition compares where demand and supply are equal. The perfectly competitive market will determine wages. That will be the perfectly competitive employment, and that will be the perfectly competitive wage. Now, if we compare the wage has gone down in monopsony, and we look at employment has also fallen. So we have proven it for 3 times now that when there is imperfect labor market, wages fall, unemployment rises. So this is not needed, the green. So I have to redraw the MIC curve again. So if we look at the question, will an imperfect labor market lead to lower wages and higher unemployment? So we say yes. In trade union, it happened. Higher wage, low employment. In minimum wage, yes, it has happened. Higher wage, lower employment. Yes, in monopsony, lower wage, high unemployment. But now we will now discuss the cases where even in imperfect labor market, wages as well as employment may go up. One such case is where trade unions encourage their members to undergo training that enhance their productivity. This will raise the MRP and demand for labor. So if demand for labor, that is MRP, shifts to the right because of better training and because of better productivity and because of better demand, in that case, wages as well as employment may go up. So one of the cases where trade unions or government spend money on the training of workers and that enhances their productivity, that will raise their demand and that will raise their wages as well as employment. Again, the second case where there could be a simultaneous increase in wage and employment, that is when a trade union comes and bargains in monopsony. For this, we have to draw the demand curve, the curves for monopsony again. That is supply curve for labor, that is AIC as well as wage, and MIC lies above it as workers have to be paid higher wage. The firm has to pay higher wage to all workers to hire more workers. Demand for labor and MRP is downward sloping. Actually, there is no demand curve for labor in monopsony. I can remove this. That's another discussion, that why is demand curve missing. So I can write only MRP to make it more accurate. Now, if we talk about the trade union, before trade union, the monopsony equilibrium point is E, and one workers would be hired and W1 would be the wage. Now, in case trade union comes and they decide a wage, bargain for a wage that is higher than W1, that is WT. Now, when the wage has gone up, it will also raise the employment. So look at this. The intervention of the trade union has not only raised the wage, but has also raised the employment. So there is an exception. So this word which says, does it always lead to lower wages and higher employment? We said there are 3 cases where an imperfect labor market lead to lower wages and higher unemployment, but there are a couple of cases where imperfect labor market may not lead to lower wages and high unemployment. Actually, it may do the opposite and may lead to higher wages and higher employment. And that is one case where labor productivity is improved, and the other case where trade union intervenes and bargains. So as long as the wage is not higher than W2, as long as the wage is equal to MRP of the last worker, if trade union bargains wages in this region, that is W1 and W2, They do not only win a wage increase, they also win an increase in employment. So we can conclude that imperfect labor markets do not always raise wages at the expense of employment. In some cases, where workers become more productive, and in some cases where trade unions successfully bargains with monopsony, wages as well as employment may go up even in an imperfect labor market. Now that concludes my discussion for this essay. I hope you found this video useful. Please do subscribe our channel and forward and share this video to those who may be interested in knowing more about A-level economics. Thank you.